It's 1750. The fire has gone out, and with it, your only protection against rot, hunger, and a deadly well outside the door. In this kitchen, your grandmother isn't cooking. She's waging war against time itself, armed with salt, smoke, and a single fragile flame. The cold hearth. In the 18th century, the kitchen had a pulse. It beat in the brick chimney that rose like a spine along the farmhouse wall, a design that became common in the early 1700s as central hearths gave way to sidewall fireplaces. It breathed through the open mouth of the hearth, swallowing logs and exhaling smoke. It glowed in gradients, roaring flame at the back, steady coals at the center, soft ash at the lip. If the fire died, the house did not simply grow cold. It stopped functioning. There was no cast iron range yet. Those would not become common until after 1830. This was the era of the open hearth, and mastering it was less about cooking and more about building a temperature. The kitchen alchemist did not turn knobs. She moved iron cranes, she banked coals, she shifted kettles inches at a time because inches meant degrees. The hearth had zones: flame for boiling, coals for steady stewing, ash for slow burial cooking. A potato tucked beneath hot ash would soften without scorching. A pudding bag suspended over steady coals could boil for 7 hours without tearing. 7 hours. Imagine the patience, the timing, the intuition. This was not convenient. This was choreography, the boiling world. The 1700s was, above all, the era of boiling. Pots hung constantly over the fire, kettles filled with pottage, a thick stew of grains, roots, scraps of meat, onions, and herbs. It was eaten at breakfast, it was eaten at midday, it was eaten at night, and often it never stopped cooking. New ingredients were added as old ones were removed. A bone might simmer for days, surrendering marrow and minerals. Barley swelled and softened, greens wilted, fat rose and was skimmed, saved, reused. The stew was less a recipe and more an ecosystem. The soundscape of this kitchen was not silence, it was rhythm. The hiss of simmering broth, the crack of shifting logs, the grinding circle of mortar and pestle. The mortar and pestle, unchanged for millennia, was still the primary processor of food. Peppercorns, nutmeg, dried herbs, sugar, all reduced to powder by hand. Nutmeg, especially. By the 1740s, nutmeg had become a status spice. It appeared in everything: puddings, meat pies, custards, even savory stews. Not because food was bland, but because spice masked the creeping edge of age. When meat hovered on the brink of turning, nutmeg and mace could perfume it back into acceptability. Extravagance was sometimes camouflage. Sugar in stone. On the table sits something that looks decorative, a pale cone, hard as plaster. It is not decoration. It is a sugar loaf. Sugar did not come granulated. It came conical, compressed, and solid. To use it, the kitchen alchemist took iron sugar nippers, heavy, scissor-like tools, and snapped off shards with a decisive crack. The shards were then ground in the mortar until fine enough to dissolve. Each cone might represent months of sweetness. It was stored carefully, chipped deliberately. Sugar was luxury and preservation tool alike, used in jams, preserves, and dessert dishes that declared status. Sweetness required labor, even pleasure had to be engineered. Pudding in a bag. One of the great marvels of the 18th century hearth was the pudding cloth. Flour a cloth, butter it, spoon in a dense mixture of suet, dried fruit, flour, eggs, and spice. Tie it tight, lower it into a boiling kettle, then wait and wait and wait. 7 hours was not unusual. The pudding bobbed and knocked gently against the pot's interior, steam working its slow alchemy. When finally lifted and untied, it emerged spherical and steaming, sliceable, fragrant with nutmeg and dried currants. It tasted faintly of smoke. Everything did. How did bread avoid tasting like a campfire? Technique: covered bake pots, ancestors of the Dutch oven, were buried in coals, lid heaped with embers to create even heat. Some wealthier homes in the late 1700s experimented with enclosed ranges, but most farmhouses relied on iron bake kettles and brick ovens heated by firewood, then cleared of ash before bread went in. Temperature control was intuition, not measurement. You learned by failure. Burnt crust, raw center, try again, the salt war. But heat was only half the battle. The greater enemy was rot. Without refrigeration, meat was a ticking clock the moment it left the animal. Salt was the refrigerator of the 1700s, abrasive, desiccating, life-saving. Sides of pork were packed in barrels layered with salt. Beef soaked in brine, strong enough to sting a wound. Fish were salted, then dried. Hams were smoked in chimneys, suspended from hooks where wood smoke curled around them for weeks. This was biological warfare. Salt drew moisture from flesh, making it inhospitable to bacteria. Smoke added chemical compounds that discouraged microbial growth. Pickling submerged vegetables in acidic baths where pathogens struggled to survive. The kitchen alchemist did not know the word microbe, but she knew smell. She knew slime. She knew when a brine barrel had turned traitor. If the salt failed, the family starved. The potato fear. It's easy to imagine potatoes as humble staples, but early in the 1700s, suspicion clung to them. Some believed potatoes carried disease. Some feared eating them would lead to death within 7 years, a superstition born from their membership in the nightshade family and their unfamiliarity. In certain regions, they were not served as peasant food, but as novelty dessert, boiled, then dressed with sugar, spice, and lemon. Imagine the irony. A food we now associate with survival once wore the costume of luxury. Over the century, practicality won. Potatoes proved hardy, productive, and calorie-dense. By the late 1700s, they were entrenched. But the suspicion reminds us food culture evolves slowly. Fear can delay nourishment. The liquid diet. Now, imagine the well outside the farmhouse. Still. Reflective, possibly lethal. Water, untreated, often carried bacteria invisible to the eye. Dysentery and waterborne illness were constant threats, so families drank fermentation, hard cider, beer, wine, even children. Not strong ale, but small beer, low in alcohol, brewed quickly, safer than water. Apples were pressed in the autumn, their juice fermented into cider that became the farmhouse's daily hydration. Cider was the soft drink of the 18th century. Barrels lined cellars, mugs were filled morning and night. The slight alcohol content inhibited bacterial growth, making it a practical solution. What happened when cider ran out mid-winter? Anxiety. Fermentation required planning. Apples had to be abundant. Barrels had to be sealed tight. A failed brew meant facing thawed well water in spring, and the illnesses that followed. The kitchen alchemist monitored not only fire and salt, but yeast. Yeast without packets. There were no tidy envelopes of dried yeast. Leavening came from Barm, the frothy yeast skimmed from fermenting beer, or from sourdough starters kept alive like pets. Bread rose because someone had brewed. Chemical leaveners like baking soda did not enter kitchens until the late 1700s and early 1800s. Before that, air was whipped into eggs by hand to lighten cakes. Muscle replaced chemistry. Bread was denser, heavier, more sustaining. The smell of rising dough mingled with smoke and cider, creating the signature perfume of the farmhouse, burial and banked coals. Winter required creativity. Food could be buried beneath straw, sand, or even under insulating ash to maintain stable temperatures. Carrots and turnips were stored in root cellars packed in damp sand. Apples layered carefully to avoid bruising. Ash, surprisingly, was protection. Banked coals, carefully covered to smolder overnight, allowed a fire to be revived by morning. Let it die completely, and you faced the labor of flint and tinder in pre-dawn cold. Fire was not casually extinguished. It was managed like a living thing. The genius of mockery, scarcity births invention. Mock dishes flourished in the 1700s. Mock apricots made from carrots simmered in sugar syrup with spice and sometimes a touch of apricot kernel for aroma. Mock goose crafted from lentils and potatoes, seasoned and shaped to resemble roasted fowl. Mock turtle soup, mock oysters, mock everything. These were not jokes. They were edible theater. They allowed families of modest means to experience the illusion of luxury. They fooled neighbors. They stretched ingredients. They demonstrated ingenuity. Poverty did not eliminate aspiration. It transformed it. The tech stack of 1750. Imagine laying out the tools of the kitchen alchemist. Mortar and pestle, iron kettle, crane and trammel, sugar nippers, pudding cloth, brine barrel, smoke blackened hooks. That was the tech stack. No electricity, no refrigeration, no thermometers, only sensory intelligence, sight, the color of coals, sound, the pitch of a simmer, smell, the whisper before spoilage, touch, dough, elasticity, ash warmth. Cooking was embodied knowledge. It was apprenticeship and inheritance. The cookbook revolution. In 1729, a book titled The Complete Housewife was published, one of the first major cookbooks used in the American colonies. Recipes traveled in ink, not just memory. Later, in 1796, American Cookery by Amelia Simmons introduced native ingredients like corn and turkey into printed recipes, marking a culinary shift toward regional identity. But most knowledge still passed grandmother to granddaughter, hand to hand over flour-dusted tables. Books advised, grandmothers adapted, the hungry gap, and then came spring, the most feared season. Not winter, spring. By late winter, salted meat dwindled, root cellars thinned, barrels emptied. The fresh greens of spring had not yet matured. This was the hungry gap. Calories ran low, cider barrels lightened, stews stretched thinner and thinner. Creativity intensified. Nettles were foraged, last apples rationed, bones boiled again. The kitchen alchemist's greatest fear was not flame or frost, it was depletion, the laboratory of survival. Stand again in that hearth-lit room, hear the mortar grinding, hear the snap of sugar nippers, hear the kettle's constant hiss, smell wood smoke woven into cloth and hair, smell brine and vinegar, smell nutmeg, extravagant and defensive. This was not quaint. It was chemical engineering without textbooks, microbiology without microscopes, thermodynamics without gauges. Grandmother did not simply follow recipes. She read seasons. She measured by instinct. She guarded embers like treasure. Her kitchen was not a room. It was a laboratory of survival. And every loaf, every barrel, every steaming pudding was proof that resourcefulness, not abundance, built the 1700s farmhouse. If the fire held, if the salt bit deep enough, if the cider fermented true, the family lived, and in the quiet crackle of banked coals, the kitchen alchemist prepared for another day. When the embers were finally banked and the kettle hushed to a whisper, The kitchen alchemist knew tomorrow's survival was already in motion. In the brine barrel biting deep, in the cider quietly fermenting, in the dough rising by borrowed yeast. She did not cook for comfort. She engineered against hunger, against rot, against the long shadow of the hungry gap. In a world without dials or guarantees, her tools were instinct, patience, and flame. And every meal was proof that resourcefulness, not abundance, kept the 1700s farmhouse alive.